Welcome back to Project 111. Today we're going to be talking about this. Now, what is it? Where did it come from? And why do we care? Well, it's pretty obvious that it is a brick on wheels that we also call a Jeep Wrangler JKU. Now, where did it come from? Well, when a brick and a car really love each other, they get together. The car has a little bit too much gasoline, they make bad decisions, and 9 months later you get one of these. All right. And why do we care? Well, probably because it's one of the most popular vehicles of all time. The Jeep Wranglers are absolutely everywhere, and I think it's fairly safe to say that they are probably one of the best selling vehicles of all time. And the good part about that is that they really maintain their value. So if you have one, it's a safe investment. Make sure to tell that to your wife whenever you're looking at it, because they are really not safe investments. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the JKU platform specifically. They came out in 2007 and they were made all the way up until 2018. And when you're looking at them, there's two very different, we'll say, generations within it. The first generation ran from 2007 to 2011. Now that model came with a 3.8 liter V6 and a 4-speed automatic, or you could also get the 6-speed manual transmission. And then from 2012 to 2018, you got the 3.6 liter V6 with a 5-speed automatic, or again, the 6-speed manual transmission. And there's also several different models within it. You know, you can get like a Sport, you can get a Sahara, Rubicon. Those are the main ones that you can be looking at. I don't know if they had many other options for the JKU models. Nowadays, there's about a million different options. You got high tides and Willys and everything else. So going back to the first generation, we'll start with talking about the motors, and then we'll move to the transmissions, and then, you know, like axles and drivetrain and steering and the interiors after that. So starting with the motors, the first generation came with a 3.8 liter V6. They weren't necessarily a bad engine, but they're not really known to be a good engine either. They weren't very strong. They had quite a few problems with oil consumption, leaks, and a problem with the exhaust manifolds cracking and leaking. And then you get to the 3.6 liter in 2012, and you got more power, more reliability. They're actually pretty good engines overall, as engines go. It doesn't matter what make or model it is, what kind of engine it is, they're all going to have issues. And so this one, some of the key issues were an oil cooler failure that a lot of people experience. And the oil cooler is down inside the valley of the motor. And if you're not familiar, then what that means is you have your engine block where your cylinders are, and then you have your heads on top of that, and between your heads you have what they call a valley, and that's where on this model the oil cooler sits, and then you have your intake manifold, and that's where the air comes in. So this oil cooler is mostly plastic. Over time and lots of heat cycles, they will start to crack and leak down in the valley of the motor, so you don't really notice it until you've already leaked quite a bit of oil, typically speaking. So an easy way to keep an eye on that is to, of course, check your oil often and look down in the valley of the motor. Let me show you. So this is what we're referring to. This is your oil filter housing, and it attaches to the cooler that we're talking about. And as you can see, it's very hard to see around it. You only get these few little cracks where you can see. So you just got to pay attention and try your best to maybe get a flashlight and look down up in there and make sure that there's no oil coming out. Other common issues with these Jeeps would be camshafts or valve tick, or they'll start wearing out over time and cause issues. But for the most part, you're probably going to be okay. Like I said, these are actually pretty good engines. And you know, I've seen, like, my grandfather's had 3 minivans that have this exact same engine in it, that he's ran over 400,000 miles. His last one he had right up under 500,000 miles. And the only reason he let go of that one was because the transmission went out. again. And out of those, he never really had any major issues out of the motor itself, aside from the oil cooler issue that we're talking about. So beyond that, you know, my only other real complaint is that it's the serpentine belt. Changing that out isn't your typical serpentine belt one ratchet kind of job. Most of the time you can use one ratchet, loosen up the tensioner, pull your belt off, swap on your new one, you're done in about 10 minutes. This one, you need like 9 different socket sizes. You got to pull the alternator off because they made it all weird. So, and you can see it here a little bit. See how they mounted the alternator backwards, and then your serpentine belt runs down through here. You can kind of see a pulley right up in here somewhere. So that's a bit odd, having to remove your alternator to change your serpentine belt. But I mean, if you enjoy working on your own stuff, it's really not that big of a deal. It was just something that was a little bit unexpected for me because I've never done one on one of these before. Moving on. So these things also have an issue with running a little hot. And by hot, I mean it's, you know, like my Tahoe. It never sees over 210. This thing, I've had it, you know, trying to accelerate, get back up to speed onto a highway, climbing up big, you know, big hills or whatever, doing strenuous tasks like that. I've seen it like 220, 225, but once you let off the throttle a little bit, give it a break, it cools down pretty quick again. But the big reason behind that is because that engine inside this engine bay is like trying to squeeze into them old Wranglers from high school after you spent the last 13 years eating cheeseburgers and downing Michelob Ultras. Like, you still have a metabolism, you know. It is tight up in there, you know. So that's the main problem with that, and that's why this big old sexy hood isn't just for looks. These are active vents, and whenever it's running, you can actually see heat dissipating out of it. That really does have a function on this Jeep. And if you get one of these, I would highly recommend putting one of those on it. One, because, you know, they look awesome. And two, it really does serve a purpose and it helps. They also make other things. You know, you can get a larger radiator if you wanted to. Mishimoto makes a good one from what I'm seeing on reviews. It has a higher capacity so it can cool better. They also make an upgrade for that oil cooler, so you'll have less of a risk of having issues in the future after you swap over to that. But really, a lot of the issue comes from having larger wheels and tires and having more strain on the engine because of that. Thankfully, I was able to re-gear my Jeep, which we'll talk about it in a little bit. So that really helps this thing out a lot. But, you know, all of these issues, they sound like a lot because we're putting them all condensed right together. But all in all, this Jeep is 10 years old. It's got 85,000 miles on it, which is very low mileage for a 10-year-old vehicle nowadays. But, I mean, I don't have any issues out of it. It doesn't leak oil. It doesn't burn oil. It doesn't, you know, run excessively hot or give me any issues like that. The AC is phenomenal, but that 3.6 liter is known to be a pretty powerful for a V6 engine that is still reliable and relatively fuel efficient. I mean, I usually get 14 to 16 miles to the gallon and I'm running 37-inch tires, and this is a pretty heavy Jeep. Moving on to the transmissions, the 2007 to 2011 models, you got the 4-speed automatic, not really the greatest transmission. Neither is the 5-speed or the second generation, but I mean, come on. I mean, how many transmissions have you ever heard of that were actually like problem free? I mean, I've been hearing good things about the new 8-speeds, but people still complain about it. It doesn't matter what engine, transmission, or anything you're talking about. People are always going to have something to say about it. So mine, lucky enough, has a 6-speed manual, which is really cool. You know, it's kind of a dying thing nowadays, but of course, it is also not without issues. They're known to kind of pop out of gears at times. Mine in particular, whenever I'm downshifting into 4th gear and trying to engine brake, I gotta pull back on it. Otherwise, every now and again, it'll want to pop out of gear. I have heard that upgrading to like a B&M short shifter could help that. But, I mean, at the end of the day, if there's something worn out inside the transmission, there's nothing that short shifter is going to do. So that's something to consider, but I'm not really particularly worried about it. So I'm just going to keep dealing with it because it doesn't happen too terribly often. Drivetrain, the big, axles is a big topic of discussion for these. Most of the lower models come with a Dana 44 in the rear and a Dana 30 up front. That's what this one came with. Factory was a Dana 30 up front. They're really small and scrawny axles that don't really hold up to big tires and heavy use very well. But it all depends on what you're going to be using the truck for. If you go up to a Rubicon, those come with Dana 44 front differentials under them, so it'll handle 37s a little bit better than the 30 will. But it's really still not that much beefier than a 30 whenever you're looking at them. Mine has been upgraded to a Dana Ultimate 44. I really wish I could have put out the extra money and gotten, a Fusion axle, or a Terraflex was probably my first choice whenever I was looking, but the budget just wasn't there. We had just gotten T-boned by an Altima, so we had to kind of take the upgrade that we could get and roll with it. So a lot of the issues people have with these things as far as drivability and wearing out tires and not driving straight or what have you, a lot of that, death wobble that people complain about, that comes from lack of maintenance. Most of the time, death wobble, bad drivability is going to come from an improper alignment, bad ball joints, bad track bar, bad drag link, or bad tie rod ends. Or, you could even have bad wheel bearing. So whenever you lift one of these, it changes the geometry of the suspension and steering components. And you really don't want to take it to some Joe Schmo, like normal box store kind of alignment shop. You want to find a place that actually specializes in and knows lifted vehicles with a lot of aftermarket components on them, because they're going to know how to set up your steering to help you get as close to factory as possible. And this is probably a subject that we could dive into and talk for a very long time about, and I would probably reach the end of my knowledge base pretty quick. But generally speaking, most people like lifting these Jeeps, and I don't blame them. I do not like the look of a stock Jeep. Having a stock height Jeep should be, a jailable offense, honestly. They're pretty heinous. At least put 33s on it, man. At least make it look like a four-wheel drive. But I digress. If you look back in my video history, you'll see that I've put ball joints in this. That is a huge issue with these. It's a solid front axle. It's an issue that you're going to have, which especially gets exacerbated by having big old tires on it. Even though I picked a fairly light set of wheels and tires for, being 37-inch tires, there's still a lot of leverage here acting against all the components. So it's going to wear things out faster and create more problems. And that's also why it's extremely important to have somebody that knows how to properly align it, how to reset your caster angles, and how to get your toe correct and everything. Because caster is probably the main thing that people mess up on. I've taken mine to a couple of shops and they set me at like 10 degrees of caster, and you're supposed to be at like 7. So what that does is it makes it not want to return to center properly and gives it more bump steer. So you hit a bump and it wants to yank the wheel over. Having proper caster helps with that. Having your angles correct is what really makes these things drive right. And that's why I chose this Jeep. I didn't want this Jeep whenever I was looking that day. I was scared to buy a lifted Jeep like this. But I test drove every other used Jeep that they had out there. They were all smaller than this, and every one of them drove like absolute garbage because they had cheap lift kits, worn out parts, and they were just all over the road. They felt extremely squirmy. I got into this, and this one had been properly done. Got a long arm lift kit on it, and whoever aligned it really knew what they were doing. I wish I could find that guy and be able to get him to maintain it from here on out. Because you could be driving down the freeway and let go of the steering wheel and it practically drove itself. It drove so straight and perfect. It didn't matter bumps coming up on and off of bridges, potholes, nothing. It would just drive straight through it and never yanked the wheel or anything. And so that's why I ended up buying this. Of course, if you're buying a lifted one, you really want to look very close. This one, I crawled up underneath it for, geez, probably 30 or 40 minutes in the middle of July in Texas in a parking lot, because that's how worried I was about it. I didn't want to buy something that someone built like this and then went and ragged on it, and now they're getting rid of it because it has a problem. But you know, after further investigation, it really looks like this thing was like a pavement princess that went down to the beach every now and again. And so I bought it. It looked like it was in really good shape, and it's been a really good Jeep for us. So, you know, talking about axles, like we said, with the Rubicons, you can get Dana 44s front and rear with locking differentials front and rear, which will really give you the traction you want off-road. But for most people, that's not normally necessary. Most people don't really take these things off-road. They might hit a gravel road here and there. And so a Sahara might be a really good choice for you. You know, if you're buying one that you know that you're going to build up and spend a lot of money on, a Sport would probably be a good choice for you, because that's where you're going to save the most money. They're cheaper than everything else, and they don't have as many options and as many electrical doodads to go wrong if you're trying to put Dana 60s up under it. So, you know, whenever you're buying one, you really got to think about how you're going to use it and be realistic with that. Don't buy this thing thinking that you're going to be going off-road every weekend, and you know, you've stretched your budget beyond your means with just purchasing it in the first place, and now because now you're not going to have money to do anything in it, and it's just going to sit because you don't got money to pay for gas to go and waller around in the mud, and you don't got money to fix things after you do that. But you really got to think about what you're going to do with it whenever you buy it. If you're a weekend warrior, you know, Saharas are great. Sometimes you can find them with a limited slip rear differential that'll give you plenty of traction off-road. That's kind of where I sit with all of this, is I don't really get to go off-road very much. One, because limited funds, and two, because I don't like tearing up my stuff, and I don't like letting them get super muddy and dirty. So usually every time I go off-road, I end up coming home and spending a couple of hours, you know, pressure washing this thing top to bottom, especially bottom. Because leaving that dried up mud under there will end up rusting out your frame. So my idea behind the way I built my axles was, one, we were putting bigger tires on it, or we've got bigger tires on it, so it needs to be re-geared to handle that and give this motor a break. So I went down to a 456 gear, which I found to be a pretty decent gear for this. Actually, whenever I had this thing re-geared, I had 35s on the Jeep. I had no plans of going to a 37. But as things go with Jeeps, I found out, I started looking more into my lift kit, and I was like, oh hey, I can fit 37s under there. Kind of want 37s now. And yeah, so I geared it for 35s, and now I have 37s, which is all right. It helps me have just a little bit more top end speed there, so I'm not, you know, revving the heck out of the motor to try to do 75 miles an hour. And I like that. You know, if I was gonna gear this for the 37s, I probably would have put 488 gears into it, but you know, that's all right. It's not that far off. It's a lot better than the 321s that was in it. And the JKs, you know, that's something to take into consideration. You know, factory on these, you could get a 321 gear ratio, you could get a 373, and you can get a 410, none of which are going to be particularly awesome for 35s. If you want 35s and for this thing to handle the way that it really should, you know, 456s are pretty much the go-to gear ratio for that. But when I had my gears done on this, I had a True Track posi traction unit put in the back. Posi traction, limited slip. I really don't remember which one the True Track is, but either way, whenever I hit the pedal and I'm off-road, both tires spin. When I'm on the road and I need turning radius, one tire spins. It does what I want it to. So I like that it's there when I need it, and it's not there when I don't. Up front, I originally went with a posi unit, but whenever this thing got hit and we're buying it a new axle, they didn't offer a posi unit for it. They had locker options. You could get the E locker for it, or you could get the ARB air locker. And while I do have onboard air on this, I just don't like the extra headache of that. So I just went with the Eaton E-Locker, and it has been absolutely awesome. If I start getting into something where I don't feel super comfortable, I can flip a switch, and now both my front tires are going to be pulling as hard as they can. Both my back tires are going to be doing the same thing, and that's actually a really good feeling, knowing that whenever I go off-roading, I have 4 tires spinning and not 2. And it's usually always the wrong 2 tires that are spinning. So as far as the interior goes, they're pretty small. I'm 6'4", about 230 pounds. My oldest son is 6'2", and yeah, we have a little bit of an issue trying to fit up into this thing. But I mean, it's probably like, I don't know, comparable to a Honda Accord inside of there. So you got some room, but it's not great. Long trips, this isn't really the greatest choice for my family. I got 3 kids, but you know, short to moderate trips were fine. My wife is really short, so the son sits behind my wife, and she is able to move her seat up and give him that little bit of extra leg room, so thankfully that works out. So another thing about the interior that's specific to the manual transmission is that the clutch pedal is has a really long throw. You got to get it all the way to that firewall, and it does not like going into gear unless you have it all the way clutched in. Most vehicles, once you get out of first, you know, you can push it in halfway and get to the next gear. This one, it doesn't like that. It wants all the clutch. And since it's such a long throw, my wife had to move the seat all the way up, and she was like this on the steering wheel so that she could reach the clutch all the way in. So I ended up having to, I'll show you. So I ended up having to cut my clutch pedal off right on top of the pedal, and I built it this bracket right here, drilled out holes, bolted it on, and this was of course supposed to be temporary. I wanted to try it out and see how it worked. And my idea was I was going to come back and clean up that metal and make it a little bit nicer, and I never did. And then I took an old crock that I had, cut it in half, and then drilled some holes into it so I could zip tie it onto the clutch pedal itself, and that buys an extra inch of length. So whenever I built that bracket, it extended it down and then out. So it gives her a little bit more leverage on it, because this is kind of a heavy clutch pedal for being for a little V6 truck. So I wanted her to have extra leverage, and I wanted it to be, you know, closer to her. So then now we're about 3 inches closer to her. So she's able to put a little bit of space between her and the steering wheel, which is very important whenever you're running airbags, or if you just don't want to get smashed into a steering wheel if you get into a wreck with an Altima. So some of the good parts about the Jeep is that they're a really cool vehicle. They're really narrow, so getting through the woods is easier. You can get down tighter trails. The JKUs have a little bit more length to them, so they're a little bit less tippy in a lot of situations. Apparently that helps with a lot of off-road stuff, having just that extra little bit of length compared to just the regular JKs, the 2 doors. Of course, it does reduce your breakover angle. You know, you might belly out on things a little bit easier. There's huge aftermarket support. I mean, you can shop for days for a bumper. This one here is a Pro Line, and the rear is the one to match it. And while they're pretty expensive, I think I saw online that these things are like $1,300 a piece. These aren't necessarily the ones that I would have picked for it. They were on it whenever I got it. I probably would have picked one of the ones from Savvy Off-Road. They have some aluminum bumpers. If you're actually wanting to do off-roading, I would really consider getting one that of course has winch mounts for it, and more importantly, get the one where the winch sits down inside of the bumper instead of on top of it. You want to keep as much room in front of the grill open as possible, and we had already talked about, you know, they run a little warm, so that's not really the greatest thing. Another really awesome thing about these is, I'm sure you've seen people doing it, you know, the doors come off super easy. There's normally a little bolt down here on each of these that you just unbolt. Mine are missing. I don't run them. You don't actually need them. It just makes it, I guess, harder to steal or something, but they don't jiggle. They don't make any extra noise. If somebody, I mean, you can't steal it anyway if the Jeep's locked, you know? You got to open the door to get those things loose. At any rate, in normal situations, you would take those 2 bolts loose, open the door. You'd take this strap loose from the hook, unplug it, and then lift the door up and off of it. One thing I would say, if you're going to take your doors off, roll your windows down first, and that's for two reasons. One, it'll help protect the window, and two, it makes it a lot easier to just be able to grab it by the top side of the door here, and that makes a big old handle for you to be able to grab it and pick up and move it around. The other cool part is with these roofs, I have one of the three-piece roofs. So this top section, I can pull that off independently from the rear. So I can run no top part, and that can be done extremely quick and easy. You just take these two bolts loose and then unflip all these levers. And there's two up here, one on each side. Unclip it like that and you're good to go. And it just pops right off. And then the back part of the roof, of course, you take the front part off. I think there's two bolts right up under here that you also got to get. And there's these three Torx bolts on each side inside of here. And then right here, you got to undo a power plug and then the washer hose line, washer, windshield wiper or hosey liney thingy. And that comes off. And then you get to figure out how to pick this thing up and move it somewhere. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I've only done it once, surprisingly enough, and I just got up in there, picked it up on my back, moved it as far back as I could, and then had my wife and kids come out and help me just pick it up and set it on the ground. The only reason we don't take ours off more is because we don't have a garage, and it's a big pain in the butt to put everything back on at night, because we got cats in the neighborhood, and I don't want a cat getting into my Jeep and stinking it up, because if a cat sprays in your Jeep, it's just trash after that. It's total. There's no getting rid of that smell. And probably one of the last things that I'd point out for, their obvious coolness is aftermarket support and how easy it is to modify these things. You can put like a 3-inch lift kit on one of these within a few hours and then just take it to get it aligned. Of course, you got all sorts of different styles of grills. Tons of different headlights. You can see all my light mounts and all that. These are mounts for little mirrors that I can put on whenever I pull the doors off. And really, the sky's the limit. Mine's had tons of work done to it, and it's still considered a fairly light to moderate build. So to close this thing out, I'm going to go ahead and tell you exactly what Jeep JKU stands for. All right, it's an acronym. You got to learn your acronyms. All right. So we have Jeep. It's, of course, just empty every pocket. All right. Jeep, just empty every pocket. And then JKU, that stands for Jeeps Kill Unemployment. Jeeps Kill Unemployment. Why is that? Because you're going to need a second job to afford all the extra things that you're going to want to do to this thing. It gets pricey, $2,000 for a set of tires, a $5,000 lift kit. Of course they make cheaper lift kits. You can get a cheap rough country one for like $600. But you're gonna try that out. You're gonna be like, oh, okay, I want more. This isn't enough. I want 37s. I want to be like that guy. I want 40s. So you're gonna end up getting a $5,000 lift kit because you're tired of this thing riding like crap. So once you put that $5,000 lift kit on here, now you're riding good. Now you got to get more tires. Oh, but wait, my wheels are still stock. I want cool kid wheels. Oh man, now I'm bigger. I need to upgrade my ball joints. I need to upgrade my steering so I can have those fancy aluminum steering bars on there like all the cool kids. I want lockers. I want that big old giant red track bar under there, front and rear. Now I got big tires, it doesn't stop as good. I need a big brake kit. I want to have one of these cool bumpers with the big old skid plate. I need a winch. I want angry eyes like the cool kids. I need light bars before I get lockers. Because light bars help more off-road than lockers do, apparently. I want an onboard air kit because that one guy on YouTube has an air horn on his, and that's way cool. Need exhaust. I got to get the cool flat fenders for it. The big old Western rock slider, side steps. I want them Fox shocks. I need that hood. See what I mean? Jeeps kill unemployment because you're going to need a second job to handle this thing. But would I trade it for anything else? I don't ever plan on getting rid of this Jeep. I really love it. If you're into this kind of stuff, this is like the perfect platform for you because there's so much aftermarket support for it. You can't beat a solid axle rig off-road. You can beat it on-road though. We'll admit it, but you can build these things to be actually very comfortable on-road. I actually kind of like the ride quality of this. I feel like it's actually really good. The long arm suspension, highly recommend it. That really helps with your on-road manners. And of course, off-road flexiness. And that is the Jeep Wrangler JKU. So I guess that's where we're gonna wrap it up here. If there's anything that I didn't think about or forgot to mention on this, y'all go ahead and put it in the comments. So I'm gonna go ahead and get off here. Y'all have a great day. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Y'all stay blessed.